And we're live in 3, 2, and welcome everybody to another episode of the Planet Mullins podcast. How are y'all doing today, tonight, or tomorrow, wherever it is, wherever you are? My guest today is a fantastic composer and saxophone player. He's a worldwide superstar who's happens to be home from European touring right now. And also a good friend of mine. Say hello to Jimmy Saxman Roberts, everybody.
My man, Rob Mullins in the house.
Hey, Jimmy, how are you doing, bro?
I'm good, buddy. How about you?
I'm doing fine. I was just enjoying, reading your website and stuff because many of my viewers on my channel will know that, you and I are close friends and we worked together a long time. But it's always fun to go to somebody's website to see what stuff is on there that might have not come up in conversation, this and that. And I just want to dive right in to this new thing that I found out about you, which is that you worked with Etta James, the famous blues singer. And I never knew that about you.
Hey, you did. We talked about that a few times. I'm almost sure, but that was early on in my career. My first Etta was actually the first celebrity that I met when I came to Los Angeles.
Okay.
And my friend Smitty was playing with her at the Troubadour.
Wow.
And that was one of the first times I saw a person really do business. And Don, who was the Doug Weston, I guess his name was, who ran the thing.
Oh yeah, it's Doug Weston's Troubadour. Yeah.
So Etta wanted to be paid before the gig, as she always would. And it ended up that Doug didn't want to pay her before the gig.
Uh-oh.
So we were all sitting there waiting to get paid. And Etta ended up not even actually playing that night because they didn't give her the money.
Okay.
But to spite the club owner, the leader of the band, he actually filed a grievance with the union that Doug Weston wouldn't pay them. And everybody who was sitting around, myself included, got put on a contract. So just the night of meeting Etta, I made $347 just because they found all these musicians, and I got paid for just sitting around shooting shit with Etta.
Wow, man, I'd like to get that kind of money.
Yeah, I ended up doing gigs with her a little bit later on, but that was my first meeting of her.
Wow. So it was years before that you grew up in Virginia, right? And then you lived in Toronto for a while. Tell everybody about your Toronto experience and what that was like.
Well, you know this guy. His name was William Smitty Smith.
Right.
He was a famous keyboard player, worked with everybody back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I grew up with him in Virginia. He moved to Toronto, got really famous with a group called Motherload.
Okay.
And he had made a pact with a buddy of his, John T. Davis. He made a pact with him because they learned to play piano on the same piano, John T's piano. And they made one made it, the other would make it. He was going to bring the other one along. So
I
made it. John T. was watching TV one day and he sees Smitty on TV at one of the rock shows, and he calls him, and Smitty invites John T. to come to Toronto. John T. was kind of a mama's boy, so he didn't want to go by himself. So he ended up saying, he came to the gig that night saying, Smitty invited all of us to go to Toronto. So we ended up going to Toronto and met some people and ended up getting a gig there. So I left Virginia, moved to Toronto, and had a gig at a place called Soul City. We opened for Edwin Starr because he was a big cat right at that time. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was my first big gig going to Toronto. And that lasted for about, the gig was booked for 2 months. Edwin got a gig in Europe, so he told the club owner, I'll be back, I'm gonna leave for the weekend, and I'll be back, but he never made it back. So after Edwin left, we worked one more week, and we were out on the street. But then as we moved around and got some other gigs, I just ended up staying up there.
Oh, I see.
Joined a band called Truck, recorded a record, and blah, blah, blah. I thought I was a star, but I really wasn't.
Well, you were quite the young man at that time.
Yeah, I know. But and then Smitty moved then he moved to Los Angeles.
Okay.
So when he moved to Los Angeles, he called. He said, "Man, Jimmy, you should come to LA because this is really where it's happening." So I ended up following him to LA. So, but Toronto was great back in the day, man. It was like it was just prior to disco coming in, and there was a club called the Zanzibar. I'm sure you probably know about the Zanzibar, right?
I've heard it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a club where they played music. I mean, you could jam from 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 1 o'clock at night. If you wanted yo cats and all the famous cats that would come in town, they'd come down to Zanzibar and play, and then it became a disco joint. So that was the demise of the Zanzibar, and at that point, Toronto started changing as well. So,
but did you find that doing jam sessions with people, was that as educational and as important to you developing your sound as like book learning or other kinds of instruction?
Well, I think a lot of it is just the more you jam, the more you develop your ear. Or in my case, that was the thing. And I learned, I had a certain style that I played when I went up there, which was more just an R&B honker kind of style.
Uh-huh.
But playing when I went up there, cats were playing giant steps and, real jazz tunes and things like that. So that opened my ear up to having to learn these tunes, and thereby, I'm still not a real jazz player. I can play jazz, which, but I got more accustomed to that after being in Toronto and playing those jam sessions and things like that.
What was the scene like in LA when you first moved to LA? Was there the same kind of kind of cool vibe with a club that was like the Zanzibar that you could hang out at, or was it more like the uppity Hollywood types, or what was it like when you?
It was more, actually at that time it was more like there were clubs. There's some great clubs, and you could sit in sometimes. But the when I first came to LA, man, I started going down to the LA Central area, like down on Western and areas like that.
Right.
And I'm sitting in at places like the Tiki Lounge and the Parisian Room and things like that. Started getting some gigs, but every gig I got, the guys would offer me $100, and then at the end of the gig, they'd say, "Well, man, we didn't make that money, so we only got 25 for you." So I got to a point. I said, "Man, something's not right about that." So then I started doing the same hustle up in Hollywood. So there was a club called Sash. Sash was in the Valley.
Sash
the Club Lingerie.
All right.
The Central. You remember the Central, which ended up becoming the Viper Room?
Right.
Yeah. So I started hanging out at those joints. The Blah Blah Cafe over in the Valley. So I started hanging up in that area and started getting gigs, man. And I had a regular Monday night with a guy named Chucky Weiss, which you may or may not know. But Chucky was like the mayor of the music thing. He was never big time, but everybody knew him.
Okay.
And we had a Monday night at the Central, and he had a band called Chucky Weiss and the Goddamn Liars. but now this was before Bruce Willis was famous and Katie Seagal and all those people. And then they used to come down to the gig. Bruce would always want to sit in with the band. So he had just gotten, I think, the show Moonlighting with Sybil Shepherd.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And he would come down and say, "Man, I've written this script, man, and I want you guys to be in it." And his next question would be, "Can I sit in?" So he that carrot, man, just to get us to. But he'd come in and he played great harmonica, and obviously we never got on the show. But it was a Monday night hang, man. It was like one of the best things that I'd had ever actually experienced in being in LA. It's
amazing how sometimes the off night things end up being as fun or better than the weekend things. I did it. I used to play Tuesday nights, the place called Nucleus Nuance on Melrose.
Thank you. I've been trying to get my brain to remember the name of that place. Joe Sample used to be there. Sal Marquez, all the cats. I used to come there. Al Jarreau. That was a bad joint, bro.
That joint was great. They had a tribute to Woody Herman when Woody Herman died, and they said, and it was on a Tuesday, which was my night. So
right.
they said, "Is it okay if we take your Tuesday and we turn it into kind of like a celebrity jam benefit for Woody Herman. And I said, yeah, man, that would be great. And they said, well, there are going to be other piano players. And I said, oh, that's fine. Who are they? And they said, Joe Sample, George Duke, Herbie, and Steve Allen.
Oh, wow.
I was like,
great piano player, wasn't he?
Yeah, Steve Allen was a great piano player.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was crazy and he was funny. He was kind of a combination of Gary Owens from Laugh-In, the announcer, and Dave Brubeck.
Wow. Nucleus Nuance. I really have to write that down because it comes up every now and then and I can never remember it. What a great club, though.
Yeah, that's it's a great one. And then I'm trying to think of what club it was or where it was that you and I met in LA, because it was a lot of years ago, but I think it was
exactly the name of the club.
What's that?
I can tell you exactly the name of the club. And it wasn't a club, it was a wine bar called, I think it was called Olives on Sunset Boulevard, Sunset and Havenhurst. And it was a little wine bar sitting back there. I think AK had booked this little gig in there, and that's where I met you.
Oh, okay.
When I heard Rob Mullins was on the gig, I said, not the Rob Mullins. Not the Rob Mullins.
And I always, in those days, I had to say, no, I'm not that Rob Mullins. I'm Rob Mullins, the musician.
Oh, man.
For the viewers who don't know who Jimmy just referenced, a guy named AK, which was short for Alan Kaufman. AK was he was kind of like a booking agent and a musician guy that would put these great events together. And he would always put himself in the band as percussionist, and he wasn't really much of a musician, but the thing was, he was kind of like the Kevin Bacon factor. Like everybody knew AK knew everybody. And if you were lucky enough to get on his list, which I wasn't on his list early, but I was on his list later, then all of a sudden you have a chance to, meet a Jimmy Roberts and to work with Skunk Baxter, who played with guitar with Steely Dan, and Herman Matthews from Kenny Loggins, and all these people. And I think he was probably, I guess he was the reason that you and I met in the first place.
Without a doubt. But I met him in New York. Because there was a China Club in New York. Did you ever go to the China Club in New York?
Oh yeah, China Club in New York and China Club All Stars. That was the band.
Yeah, the China Club. Yeah, but in New York, he was a sound man for the China Club in New York, which it was one of those clubs where all the celebrities would come into town and they would congregate at the China Club. And I forget the guy, the owner, the guy, Danny something. But anyway, but AK was the sound man. So when Danny came to LA, he opened a China Club, an actual China Club down on Argyle and Selma and Argyle in Hollywood.
In Hollywood, yeah.
He brought AK out to be the sound man. Did you ever play that club?
Yeah, once or twice, but it was really hard for the jazzy kind of guys like me to fit into that crowd. I think there was some reluctance for to have jazz guys around, because it was such a hardcore rock and celebrity thing. Like, I think you fit in to that scene a lot better than I did early on, but it was Miles Joseph, the guitar player, that kind of just bridged that gap with AK and said, hey man, Rob can play, and don't bother him, and we need to hire him. And then I remember gigs where you and I'd be up on the bandstand and the horn section was always like right behind the keyboards and stuff. And then you'd be like, I'd take a solo and you'd reach out and tap me on the shoulder and say, hey man, that was badass, bro.
And you have to get props, bro. You always have to get props, man.
So but inspirationally, as far as your musical direction, I mean, you're obviously capable of playing pretty much any kind of a thing, but was it more the blues or like early R&B that helped you create your sound? Because we were talking yesterday at Hubert's house about, people whose musical sonic identity is so distinctive that you can tell in one phrase who it is. And he said that one person that's like that for him is Stanley Turrentine. Like anytime he hears 5 notes of Stanley Turrentine or Freddie Hubbard, he knows it's them. And
Sure.
I've always felt that way about your sound. I can hear one phrase of Jimmy Roberts, and I'm like, that's Jimmy Roberts.
Right. Well, it all started with R&B, man. It started out with King Curtis, and actually started out with a guy named Ace Cannon, who was a blues guy, old alto player. Played it in a song. The first song I learned, which was a blues song, was called "Tough."
Uh-huh.
I'd play it in talent shows, man, and the girls would just go, "Woo!" And I said, "Oh shit, I'm on to something here." So, anyways, but it was cats like that, Boots Randolph,
Yeah,
King Curtis, Junior Walker, Maceo Parker, all the R&B guys, man. I grew up with that.
Did you ever
go ahead?
Did you ever do like a James Brown kind of cover band or anything? Any of those kind of things?
No, but every band I played in back then, we all did James Brown. James Brown. Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. You couldn't have a band and not play that.
Right.
Or remember Night Train? He had that song Night Train. No, you don't. I can see that you don't remember it.
I remember Night Train. I remember Oscar Peterson doing it.
Exactly. Do you remember James Brown doing it? All aboard! This is the Night Train. It was bad. Just old school. Just old school, man.
Well, the old school thing is really so important. I see a lot of young musicians go back, 20 years or 30 or 40, sometimes even further, trying to, find an influence or something authentic, because in today's, modern disposable technological world, there's a lot of fake stuff out there that doesn't resonate with young people, because they can tell if Billie Holiday was really singing, or if Nina Simone was really singing, or if some artist being promoted in 2021 on a label is not really singing. You know what I mean?
Right. Of course, yeah.
Like they can feel that authenticity. And
yeah, but not only, you're right. You could feel it, because that was a true thing, the test of anything, and it even translated on the records that they did. I think that's one of the things that I would notice, and a lot of people will argue me differently, but I think that sonically, records had a feeling about them that you don't get from the digital world, because it was something about it sonically that you actually felt the music, inside your body responded. I mean, the music today sounds fantastic, right. Sonically, the thing, but there's a purity about it that I miss. That makes me miss that other warmth thing, and I can't. It's hard to explain, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I absolutely understand what that missing thing is that you're describing, because there was a simplicity in the earlier recordings where a lot of times the studios would set up, the whole band would be on one mic, and the performer would be on the other mic.
Right, exactly.
And there's not any reverb, and there's not digital delay, and not a bunch of compression, and there's not Logic Pro with 9 million ways to do it over and slice it up. It's just human beings doing a certain thing. And you hear and feel that in the old recordings. And even the guys that were multi-tracked, like in the 60s, like the Beatles, for example, that was still only a 4-track. It wasn't like, they didn't have the technology to do like what you and I do when we get in the studio. It's like, well, we've done 982 tracks. Do we do 983?
That's great. And the other thing that's really pretty funny to me, I remember, and I was telling the guy about this the other day, about when they wanted to edit a piece of music, they took out the razor blade and pulled the tape out and cut. That was an art in itself that, now all we have to do is just cut and splice on the computer and boom, it's done. But
yeah, I know the ears
about, man, it's just, and when they would reverse the tape to get a certain effect and all that, and this is like just physical hands-on stuff that people were doing, which is It's a I think it's a bit of a lost art. So only the old coasters really know what to, know about all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I for years I traveled with these plates that I had from a pressing plant in the 80s that were how they stamped my albums, because
Oh, yes, yes.
they would have these metal plates that were carved with all the grooves to your album, and then they would heat up the vinyl, and they had about 16 machines, and they go stamp, and they hold it down until it cut the grooves in the vinyl, and they would cool off the vinyl, and then your grooves would be cut right into that, and that's what people would put on their turntable.
That's really amazing. I mean, that is really amazing, man. But you carried the plates around. You had your own plates.
Oh, I had them for a long time because I was into that kind of stuff. My grandpa in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, had a sheet glass business, and that he built by the railroad after the war. And he had those kinds of plates and stampers and stuff too. So I was accustomed to that kind of thing from when I was little. And I was like, well, I got grandpa's plates and I got mine and this and that. And finally one day I said, what am I doing, man, carrying all these plates around?
Yeah.
I
got time now. You got a thumb drive. You're off and running.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the list of people that you've worked with, people that I and correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes you and I have conversations that you remember far better than I do a month later. What about the Eurhthmics? Like, was that something that happened in Europe or in LA?
What I did with the Eurhthmics was just I was in a video with the Eurhthmics, and it was a song called "Would I Lie to You."
Oh, is that why they picked you?
Well, there was another buddy of mine named Eddie Betos who was doing a lot of he was sort of doing a lot of choreography for the videos, and he was very hot for a certain amount of time.
Okay.
And buddy, we were in a band called the Nervous Brothers, but his side gig was he would choreograph music videos.
Okay.
So any things that he could pull me in on would he'd hey, go down to this thing and wear your best shit and and a lot of times I would get picked for those things. But the Eurhthmics thing was very cool because and that song is like the video goes out with me wailing on the saxophone. I didn't play it. I didn't play the thing, but I'm sort of stamped as being a part of that because of that Eurhthmics video.
Oh, so basically you were it was one of your first video acting gigs, kind of.
Exactly. Well, now, Sade, on the other hand, I got Sade's gig on a fluke. I worked with her for about 6 weeks. And Rick Braun was working with Sade at the time.
Oh, I know Rick, yeah.
Of course you know Rick. And Stuart Matherman, he was on a bus traveling through the South, and he had fallen asleep in the back of the bus. And back in those days, they had the buses had the tour buses had the pocket doors that would just kind of slide open by themselves.
Uh-huh.
And he fell asleep and with his hand out and cut the tip of his finger off.
No.
And they were on tour, so they needed someone to actually fill in. So Rick Braun said Jimmy Roberts would come in and do this gig just like that. So I get a gig I think I got a call on Wednesday night, and Thursday night I was on stage in Florida playing Sade's music.
Holy smokes, man.
So I did that for about 6 weeks. And like I said, it really was a great gig. But Stewart was saxophone, he played saxophone and he played guitar in Sade.
Oh, okay. Well, was it a cool hang, like because sometimes the star singer, they have a certain attitude and they don't hang out with their band. And speaking of Bruce Willis that you mentioned earlier, I was in his group for a couple of years, and he was always wanting to hang out with the band. He was very friendly. Some other bands I did with celebrities, the celebrity you couldn't even go near their dressing room,
Yeah. Well, Sade was very cool, man. She had her own tour bus that she would travel with her minder, who I forget the girl's name that would kind of take care of her. But during the gig, we'd kick it before the gig, and after the gig, we'd hang for a bit, and then we'd move on to some other town. But she was always she always wanted to sit on the band bus before we actually took off. So she'd hang out and we'd have a drink together and stuff. So, but man, what a beautiful lady she was. I'm not only talking about how beautiful she was physically, but just her spirit was fantastic.
Well, that really came out in her music because it resonated with so many millions of listeners. There was something about it. It was kind of like Miami Sound Machine goes soul or something to me.
Yeah, but it was lush, a little more luscious than that to me. It had a, just the way she sang those songs, and it was almost like she had a lot of love in her heart, a lot of compassion. One of my favorite songs was a song she wrote called Pearls, and it was about the Ethiopian thing, and it was about a woman. But she had a lot of compassion in a lot of the things. I mean, Smooth Operator was that was really commercial, but she just had a lot of love in her heart, and that's what I think came across in a lot of that music. And
right.
Then she did that video where she rode the horse, and I think that's you remember that video? Oh man, she really was something to look at.
Well, the video age changed a lot of things around for a lot of people, but you seem to have been already kind of in there since your debut was with Eurhthmics. Then, years passed, and I know that you ended up for quite a while now being the saxophonist for Rod Stewart. Are you in Rod's videos too?
I was in a few, but not all of them, because a lot of, he had a lot of songs that didn't have saxophone. He had a lot of the signation songs like Tonight's the Night that was done before I was in the band.
Okay.
So, but I've been on a few of his videos for sure.
So what's that's the obvious question that I'm sure you get asked all the time in interviews is it's got to be just incredible to be in a band where the star is that famous. I mean, you guys, when you go to London, you play Wembley or Royal Albert Hall, or where do you play over there?
Well, we've done all of those. Earl's Court, we used to play Earl's Court, which is closed now, but he still does a lot of the soccer, the football stadiums, as they call them.
Wow.
And he still sells out a lot of those, but a lot of the other European places, he plays more arenas than stadiums down. But he still ends up doing quite a lot of business. Well, he does a lot of business across the world, to be quite honest.
Well, I think one of the things that having my own podcast affords me is the opportunity to expose my viewers and other people out there that are music and in your case, saxophone fans, to you and to your amazing career and your amazing life. Because, I would notice that if I would go off to Japan for a few months, or I'd be in Europe for 4 months or 6 months, people in the US would just forget I'd ever even done anything.
Right, of course, yeah. Well, I mean, again, I come back, it's thank God for Rob Mullins, because he will always call me for a gig.
Well,
yeah, but I have certain accounts, man, that will always call me. I'm a first call guy for certain people. So, right. And they will check with me to see how long I'm out and things like that. So, and again, I do the courtesy of letting them know when I'm coming back, and things that they have on their books when I'm in town, I'll be that guy. But yeah. I've been fortunate with that, that I do continue to work. But it has also been this pandemic has been just a real crazy thing. I mean, when I was in Las Vegas last year when the pandemic hit, and we were scheduled, I think, to play another week in Las Vegas, and they cut us a week short. But following that, there was plans for Australia, New Zealand, UK, and just a whole year's worth of work. And in one fell swoop, it was all gone. And
wow.
I'm not alone with that, because it happened to most cats I know.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it was an interesting thing just to see how it all played out, and now it's starting to open up a little bit more. So Rod has got some dates. His 2022 is filling up fairly to sort of to do some of those dates that were canceled. So he just posted some dates starting in March in Australia, New Zealand, and then there's some American dates coming up. So waiting to see what happens for the end of this year. There are some things that they're tossing around. So, but this year may end up being, you know, kind of a bust. We don't know yet.
Well, I want to backtrack just a little bit, because
how far you want to backtrack, man?
Just to the big venues, the stadiums and all that, because see, I watched that documentary about Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. I watched that, like, I don't know, about a month or so ago. And I was looking at, I guess it was Wembley or Royal Albert Hall. I don't know where it was, but it was so huge. And they were showing the actual concert footage of Queen. And then I picture you being over there in a venue that big with that many people. Like, does that affect your playing with an energy of that size crowd? I mean, is it easier or more fun to play that big of a venue, or do you like the small places better?
And you know, it's like I don't really have a preference, because once you're on a stage that big and there you see that many people, it's like you can't see them all. So you're really just doing the show for the people, just for whoever's there. You know what I'm saying? So the energy is, if you get one person who's really giving you some love, man, which the Rod Stewart show is always, he's got fans that he's had for, I don't know, I can't even tell you how many years.
Right.
But again, he's got a built-in thing. People just waiting for him to you know, put tickets on sale. So again, he's not playing as many stadiums as he used to, but he's still filling up, you know, arenas, and he's still doing great business.
That's great.
A lot of guys his age, they've cut back to doing theaters and things like that. He hasn't gotten to that level, but I mean, he's still selling a lot of units, man.
Well,
rightfully so, because he's an incredible entertainer.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 75 years old now, and he's still, I mean, in his work ethic, you know, to be quite honest, sometimes I forget that I'm actually working for such an icon, because, you know, we've spent so much time together. It's like I forget, oh, that's just Rod Stewart. But everyone then said, damn, that's Rod, that's really Rod Stewart, you know, and it's just weird sometimes, because I have to snap back into really being grateful for being associated with somebody that big.
Well, you know, the 70s, when Maggie May first came out, when I was a kid and I listened to that song, I recognized, you know, him right away. After one or two or three hits, you could always tell it was Rod Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
And he has always had a unique kind of sound, even without the video and the persona and the hair and all that stuff. I could always tell it was Rod Stewart singing, you know, on the radio. And for anybody in entertainment to go this many decades and to still get out there and do that, like, that's a rare thing. That's like Elton John land and Billy Joel, you know?
Right, of course. But
yeah.
He works hard to maintain it. I mean, before the show, you know, he'll do like an hour vocal warm up. He has a trainer that comes out with him, and he rides a stationary bike and does stretches and things like that for an hour, some hour and a half before the show. So he's prepping himself, and then he's got an hour and a half show to do on top of that. Wow. And he's now 75 years old. So my hat's off to the cat that he's got that much energy and stamina to maintain that, you know, because he still brings it every night.
Wow. Well, you know, that's another thing, since we're in this land, that I want to, you know, as far as young people who are trying to, you know, get a big gig like that. There's two aspects to my question. Maybe it's two separate questions, but as somebody, if I was an aspiring saxophone player at Long Beach State or something, and I was getting ready to graduate, and I look at Jimmy Roberts on stage with Rod Stewart, if I had you in a workshop or a clinic, I'd raise my hand and say, Mr. Roberts, how do I get the gig with Rod Stewart? Or how did you get the gig with somebody that big, and is it still possible to even do that?
Well, I think a lot of it, man, you know, it's the same routine works now that worked back in the day. You make yourself available. You expose yourself as much as you can to as many people as you can. And if you have something to say, you'll find some gigs that will sort of keep you moving forward. And eventually there are people, and also a lot of people start with people before they're big and associate themselves with certain people. And then when they do hit, they already sort of built in with the thing, and they become a big act with a big act, so to speak.
Oh, right. Yeah. Right. So
But you know that. I mean, that's just kind of still you gotta be actively seen, because there was a guy, Frank Morgan's. It's a famous line that he used, that he always said this thing, and it made so much sense. If you're not appearing, you're disappearing. If I could tell anybody one thing, man, that's one of the most solid sort of aspects of what we all need to do. You need to go out, and if you're in town, you need to come out and meet people. You need to go out and, you know, play as much as you can, wherever you can. You know, self-promotion, bro.
That's what made the last like 16 months so difficult for everybody, is that none of us could go anywhere and do anything.
Exactly.
And you know, for me, it was the first time since I was a kid, and even middle school, going that long without having a gig. But my second Rod Stewart question, and this applies to, because I've seen you play in a lot of bands, I've had you in my band, and but what I noticed, especially, you know, in your thing with Rod, you have a certain approach that works with his singing that I think has to be planned and sort of calculated, or you worked it out over time, because there's a lot of players out there, and I notice this especially with young guys, like you know, they're always out to prove something about their saxophone or their guitar or whatever. And I've seen lead star performers get really annoyed because they're getting in the way. And
well, see, that's the key right there, man. It's like that with any. I mean, I work with a lot of singers, and that's one of the things that I get a compliment about, is that you don't get in the way. If you got, you know, if you can't get in and get out before the singer's got something to say, then you're gonna bug them. If you're trying to play over top of them, you're gonna bug them. You know, it interferes with a flow, and I've learned to just pay attention to the music, man. You know, and if I start a phrase and I know he's coming, I slide in and out. And a lot of people appreciate that about me, because I can fill the spaces for them, but I get out of the way so that they don't have to struggle to find a place to be while I'm playing.
right, well, that's that kind of like a almost like a balancing act where you've got the
Of course
counterpoint thing going.
Exactly.
I remember being on a gig one time where this just goes to the you know, to compliment you on just your general presence as a man and a human being, and as a person who carries themselves well in public, because you've got a certain kind of presence and character about yourself. And I remember us getting on the stage at some venue one night before the gig, and I was over at the piano and I was getting ready, and then you came on to the bandstand, and you picked up the sax and you turned over to me, and I remember saying to you, I got to play about 400 notes to command the kind of respect that you do by just standing there with your horn in your hand. Do you remember that night?
No, but I remember a lot of nights, Brad.
I remember that night. I was like, man, all Jimmy has to do is pick up the horn and he owns the room.
No, man. I'm going to tell you, man, some of the most incredible gigs that I enjoyed were with you, because you always pushed me. You pushed me, first of all, because you're such an incredible player. It's like, as I told you before, the first time you said, "Come on, can you do this gig with me?" I said, "Yeah, man," but I was scared, bro. and your response to me was, "Yeah." I said, I was afraid of that gig, man. And you said, "Yeah, the gig was afraid of you too." But after the first gig, man, it all just felt really natural. I didn't have to try to overplay. I just did what I did, and I think what it did, it complemented whatever you were doing, and
well,
and
yeah,
we ended up having great nights together, man, without a doubt.
Well, the thing that I've found so so great about your versatility was that even though you played jazz, but now some guys that are in that celebrity rock world too, or even a smooth jazz guy like Kenny G, like they don't want people to know that they can play actual jazz because they're afraid that's going to screw up their marketing.
Mm.
And I remember I used to talk to Dennis Turner, Kenny G's management, about that because Kenny was in the Jeff Lorber days this amazing fusion tenor player that was great. And then when he became Kenny G of the whiny soprano deal,
Careful, fella.
With the lovely smooth sounds of the soprano sax strolling by the beach, then they kind of don't allow him or whatever to go out and play what we call real jazz. But I remember when I was getting ready to make that album at Steamers in 2006, and I called you and you said, well, I don't know, man. I just kind of do what I do. I don't mind jazz. I could play it, but I don't really get called to do that. That's not my bread and butter. I said, come on, man. Come on and do this jazz album. And I'm really proud that it was called Standards and More.
Yes, I remember that very well.
Yeah. And you
know what I remember most about that record?
What?
You know what I remembered most about that record?
I
remember the night I came over to your house and you played Giant Steps for me.
Oh, the recording?
The recording of Giant Steps that we had done.
Uh-huh.
And you said, oh man, I hate my piano playing. I said, man, are you nuts? Take another listen to yourself, bro, because you were burning. You remember that? You were in Brentwood. You were living over in Brentwood in that apartment on off of
San Vicente, yeah.
Yes, that beautiful apartment. You had the grand piano and all that in there. And that was, I think I've only been there one time, but that was that night. You were really concerned about your solo on Giant Steps, and I said, man, you must be nuts.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. My favorite moment on that album is when you come in, because I remember we did Angel Eyes, and I'm playing and I do the intro and I'm Rob Mullinsing and like playing all these notes and doing all this stuff, and then it comes to the bridge and the dynamics come down and you just go bum, bum, bum. And with those three notes right there, it's like all the women are like, oh my God. Even me, I'm not even a girl. I'm like, that's like an expensive cognac just dropped in a glass or something. I mean, that's your tone on that is, I don't know that much about sax now. I used to play, but you've got a remarkable range in the kinds of tones you can get out of the sax, because you can play that really kind of smooth, like big round kind of thing, but you can also get really funky and also really, rocky and loud too, which I think.
Right.
But
well, it's something I've also said a lot of times. The music kind of tells you what to play, man. It really does. And if you really pay attention to the mood that's being created around you, then you fit into that thing and find a place to make it better if you can.
Right.
That's really what it is for me. So if you're out there funking it up with some brown sugar, then I can go with that. Or if you slow it down and want Island Girl is still one of my favorite songs of yours, and you know that too, man. I miss that song playing it with you.
That's a fun tune for sure, and it's still got quite a bit of popularity out there, which is flattering for me, because there's several versions of it now. There's the one we did, and there's the studio version, and then I'm coming out with another version of it in July with my Denver All-Star band that turned out.
Yes, I heard that. Yeah, you played that for me.
Turned out really well, but I want to put the focus back on you and your writing and your studio chops, because for those listeners out there that might have not known about Jimmy's solo artist side, as apart from the celebrity rock gig and stuff, he's been working for the past few years on developing a new kind of style and a new kind of sound, which I think is uniquely his own. And I've been fortunate to be a pretty good part of that. I've played on most of those.
Yes, you have.
But you know, sometimes it makes me a little mad because I'll come down to your studio and you'll be playing keyboards so well on some of these things.
Nah, Rob, why did I ask you to play on it for playing so well? I need you, man. I need you.
Well, I mean, you know, I can understand why you have me come in and take a solo and this and that, but some of the, especially your keyboard bass playing is so funky and soulful now. It's like, man, you know.
Well, I tell you, man, I do have this. I had this concept of a record I wanted to put out called "I Think I'm in Love" and put all these love songs on it, and I kind of got backed off of it because it didn't have enough. You know, I didn't think a love record with all ballads would be commercially viable, really. But I remember there was, man, I did that song Soul Eyes, and I asked you to play on it. You came and put a whole intro on it, man, that opened the whole thing up, and it's still one of my favorite performances from you, as well as another song, If Love Had a Name. You came in one night down to my studio and you brought your own little keyboard, and you just held it up in your lap like this, and like it was a baby, and I put a track on. And you played the most luscious solo on that, man. And it's, I want to release a lot of those things just because of your performance, man.
Oh, that's kind of you, man. I mean, I think
that's real talk, bro.
Cool.
So don't blush on me.
I'm not blushing on you, man. But the one song of all the most recent stuff that I got to play on with you, that's my favorite of all the stuff, is a cover of "A House Is Not a Home." That tune, man, if I were the consulting producer on on your project, I would put that one out there because it's just got all of those kinds of things. Like it crosses over from jazz to easy listening to love songs, to ballads and all of that. And it's quite touching, man. I think that's now you've done so much recording. I think you've recorded about 50 tunes in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, a few for sure.
But I'd have to say, you know, that I think will be, when you decide to finally put that one out, I'm going to really be excited because that's got all of the star ballad kind of quality. And I really like ballads. I'm a sappy, emotional guy when it comes to ballads, you know.
Really? I never knew that about you.
Yeah, well, I don't talk about that, but
I know you're a sentimental guy. You got a lot of bluster, but you're a sentimental cat, man. That's what I love about you, right?
Well, I haven't had that reputation because I get in so many fights over getting paid. And that brings me back to, you know, some of the Hollywood days and stuff, because don't you think it's important for young players to have some sort of sense of the street and have some sort of sense on how to do business when you're dealing with the street?
Well, without a doubt, for sure.
I mean, because I used to work at wide tracks at Selma and Wilcox, and they had Priority Records was half of that studio, which was like gangster rap to the max. And I was always thinking, man, some of these cats coming in here, I better get my butt back to Huntington Beach by like 6 p.m. because I don't know what's going to happen. And when there were money issues in there, I was actually frightened going into the office to get my check sometimes. So, you know, what's your advice for young people on how to get their money in a danger, or are there any skills that they can develop?
No, it's funny. There are two cats, man, two young cats. My nephew's one, his name is Roswell, and he's doing a lot of music with Masego, who's a young saxophone player singer. He's doing things with Matt Mason, and I often ask him about is he protecting himself with the contracts for the things that there's a lot of trust between some of these guys, and I some of it makes me nervous, but then again, there's a new way that cats are doing business these days that I don't really get. I'm still old school. I still want to see my money. I want to sign a contract for just the guarantee I get what I'm going to get and things like that. But a couple of people that I know who are in this new regime of doing music, there's a lot of trust that goes on between them. And I don't know if it'll end up being that somebody will get burned, but there's also seems a lot more money that's being bantered around with a lot of the younger artists too. I mean, that's seems to be tons of money, and I don't know how it's being generated. Or like another friend of mine just signed $100,000 publishing deal, and he produced a couple of, he produced some tracks up in Canada, and now he's down here producing some artists. He had some tracks that we used for Kanye and stuff like that. So he's getting paid somehow or another.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know how much it's written down that this is a contract. I know it's just that they're doing business, I guess.
Do you think that brings me to the next question, which is, do you think that the agents and the managers in 2021 are as important to these younger artists? Because I mean, I see the stuff that went on. Like, I recently watched Straight Outta Compton, and that was an era, early 90s and stuff, where I was somewhat ancillary to that scene. And it seemed to be a lot about it was just agents and managers in control of all that stuff. Is that, like, for people like your nephew, is he mostly just working his own scene with these guys, or is it all agents and managers?
Well, he's got one guy who is managing him. They don't have a contract, but he's negotiating deals and creating deals for the guy. Again, like I said, it's all done off of a friendship basis. And these are guys who are coming up together. They grew up together, and they're kind of, I guess, trusting that they've been friends long enough that one is not going to screw the other. But you still need agents. You still need somebody, still need somebody to book those big venues and all of that.
Right.
And it seems like there's a lot of younger guys who are actually doing those, doing those connections, because they're still managing the artists per se, same as it has always been done.
Uh-huh.
I think that, like Joe Bonamassa was an example where he decided to kind of not go to record company route, and he created his own sort of conglomerate, including even the trucking and the busing. He bought a bus, and he bought his own trucks to handle all of that. There's some people who are trying to make an independent go of it. Uh-huh. And again, Joe Bonamassa seems to be doing really quite well with his approach to it, and he's keeping it all in house.
Right.
But he's still got to negotiate with the agents, the booking agents, who still handle those, the Live Nation and all. He still got to go through them to get to the big venues, because they control them. A lot of the big venues, they own them. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my next question is about studio work, because you and I have done a lot of collaborative work, and I always have a good time. I enjoy coming down there and hanging with you in the studio and working in the room a lot more than I do the remote recording thing. I mean, some guys, who was it? It was Roberto Valli, the bass player. He had me on one of his tunes about a year or so ago, and it was smoking. The sax player was killing it, and so was the trumpet player. And it was Jeff Carruthers was producing, and it was Roberto. And I listened to the track before I put my piano solo on. I said, "Man, is this your band?" And he said, "Well, kind of, sort of. The saxophone players in Brazil,
yeah, right,
trumpet players in New York." And nobody was getting together at all. But do you have a favorite kind of recording that you like to do? Like, do you prefer having people over or going somewhere else, or how do you like to do it?
Well, man, I don't mind doing it all. The last couple of months ago, I got a call from Kevin Savagar. He's producing a new record on Rod, and they just sent the track over. Just sent an MP3 over, and I put it up on my system and fired it up. I got a call from Rod, or an email from Rod about 5 days later. Brilliant saxophone solo, brother. It made the track come alive. So whatever you do that's adding to the music, and you get feedback that it worked, I don't care. Do I have to do it in the studio with cats, or no? I don't. I can, as long as it works, man. You know, because I had
Right.
a thing. I used to go in the studio with different cats, and I, you know, because I my when you talk about my tone and my style, it's not everybody's cup of tea. So I would go into a session and I tell the guy right offhand, I said, man, if I ain't got it in 3 takes, get somebody else.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of wasted time that goes down, you know, and if either you're going to get it or you're not going to get it, but to sit and work it and work it and work it. Music shouldn't. I never feel that I have to work music that hard to make it sound good. If I do, then I'm not the guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's been my thing for a long time. Fortunately, most of the time it works. But there have been times I said, man, you know, if I haven't got it in the 3 takes, bro,
Right.
call Ernie Watts or call. You know.
Well, I found it really cool. I was producing a jazz record a blues record in 2019, and I sent you a track, and you suggested Barry sax, and I was like, oh wow, man, I wonder what he's thinking of. And then you played it on there. It was on that Kids album that never came out, on that Gumbo song.
Oh yeah. Who got the gumbo?
Man, you were just, was that some kind of like New Orleans Southern kind of horn thing that people would know about?
You produced the song. The whole song was New Orleans, wasn't it?
It was pretty much that Southern.
Yeah, man. That's just what I heard on it. So, and I don't play baritone for very many people, but I pulled it and I said, man, that might work on this for you.
I loved it. Well, do you like playing the other horns like alto and soprano, or is that kind of not your vibe?
Not really, but you know, every now and then because I obviously, I own all of them, and every now and then I'll pick up the soprano and play a little something. But the tenor is my voice, man. I hear that tenor.
Yeah.
And then in Rod's gig, I play maybe alto on 2 songs.
Okay.
But the rest is all tenor, man. And sometimes, you know, and he never asks for anything any more than that.
Uh-huh.
He just lets me do what I do, and that's been one of the things that, you know, he's been very he loves what I do. He loves the vibe I bring to his music, you know, for the live thing. Sometimes almost to the point it's like he gets a little, hey, that's, you know, this is my show, you know. And I'm not out there trying to do any more than I just do what I do. But sometimes, you know, sometimes it works too well.
Right. Well, I just have always wished that it would be, you know, because I used to get these cameos when I was playing in the Crusaders and in some other bands where they would just give me a whole feature.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I wish that Rod would do that for you. So, like, you know, because some of the other stars that do Vegas and this, now I used to have a friend that worked for Sheena Easton, and he always got a keyboard feature during her clothes change.
Right.
You know, when they were in Vegas. Now, it depended. His keyboard feature might last 8 bars, or it might last 2.5 minutes, depending on how long she was, you know.
Sure.
Off stage. But that would be great if there was you know, room in one of Rod's shows for you to just do a whole saxophone feature. I would.
Well, so you've never seen a Rod show?
No, I haven't seen one, man. I've just seen clips.
In the early days, I used to had a feature on a song called Passion, and we would do it. You know, the whole band would stop, and I'd be in the middle of the arena and just play for 3 minutes by myself.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and it was kind of cool. And I used to do that on alto.
Okay.
And the shows that I've been doing over the last couple of years, there's a song called Downtown Train that it breaks down, and I do a whole, you know, I do about 3 or 4 choruses, and then it stops, and I do about another 2 minutes by myself. And then the song finishes. So he still features me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he kind of pays attention a little bit to that. And again, it's the same thing. He needs a certain amount of time to change his suits. He can go out and change a jacket or pull off something here or there.
Right.
But he does more time to kind of change his whole outfit. And so those songs like that will be what he'll utilize me for. So yeah, I get my share, man. I get my share, and until he gets. Sometimes he gets a mood, and he'll say, "Oh, that's too much saxophone," and he'll. Then he'll go through that, and then I'm back doing what I do. So
yeah,
but I never question that cat, man. His instincts are just so right on for the most part. And he pays attention to everything. He really is just. He's got incredible ears and an incredible sensibility to the music. That's how the music works, and his arranging things. And,
right.
He's a really incredible guy.
I had, I had read somewhere, I can't remember where it was, on some fan site or something, that when Rod goes through Europe, there's like a tour bus, and then there's a bus with like chefs on it and stuff like that, cooking the food. Is that true? Or is that just rumor?
No, we got a whole catering company that travels with the tour, and they cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's a truck with just stoves and refrigerators and things like that. And the chefs go out and buy fresh stuff every day for the day, and then at the end of the day, they pack it up and set it up in whatever venue you're in.
Wow.
That's how most of the rock and rollers do it, man. Most of the big tours will have that going on.
Oh, okay, cool.
But Rod doesn't tour bus. He the band rides on a tour bus, the crew rides on a tour bus, and Rod flies in a private jet.
Right. Got it.
So he does this thing like that. But it's a very self-contained situation, because if you think about it, it's usually it's a crew of all personnel. There's probably about 40 to 50 people that make that whole thing work, with the video crew, the sound crew, the catering crew, and just, it's a lot of people, man.
Wow. Yeah. 40 people is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when we do a gig, we got the musicians, and you come in and set up. You got to be the sound man. You got to be everything. But those gigs are just, everything is covered. It's just as sort of elite as you can get, and trying to make something work in minimum amount of hassle.
So great to have all those insights about the big time. Well, what's your upcoming plan as far as putting your new album out or whatever?
Well, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. We discussed possibly trying to get together and sort of sculling out an idea of what songs I should, that you would hear, because you are a producer. You formulated enough CDs that I've discussed the possibility of sitting down and putting that together, because I do want to put out another record in the next 6 months or a year, and I've recorded enough material. So I need to go through it and find out what you think I need some ears as to what would be the best and strongest material to make a solid record. And I think you'd be a good guy for that. So, we've discussed it, but we haven't gotten to doing it yet. But
well, you've been too busy with your vacation home in the dead of winter.
Well, man, you gotta have something to do, because it hasn't been music over this last year. So it's been nice to do some renovation on this place, man.
For sure.
So I'm still waiting to get it finished, so I can go to actually spend some time and see what it feels like to be down there.
That's so great, man. Well, thanks, Jimmy, for taking time out of your schedule to come on the Planet Mullins podcast. I know it's, we got through the pandemic thing. It was rough for all of us, but we're on the other side of it now, man. It's
without
great.
A doubt, man, without a doubt. Well, you and I've been talking about trying to do this for a while, man. So I got to thank you for being patient, and that we finally got a chance to do this. So I hope this works for you. And it's been easy to pull this off with you, just to have some dialogue, man, and spread the word about all of the things that we've talked about.
Now let's talk about your website and your Facebook and Instagram and any of those links. If you want to plug them or not, it's up to you.
Well, I always tell people that JimmySaxmanRoberts.com has been up for a while, and that's, once I'm up and working, I put the dates and things on that. Any upcoming projects that I'm doing would be on that.
Okay.
And I am on Facebook as well, Jimmy Saxman Roberts. You can catch me there, and every now and then I'll drop a single or two, just to see if there's any bites for some Jimmy Roberts music. So I'm keeping my foot in the game with that as well. But I'm just enjoying being able to survive in this life as a musician in whatever aspect I can. And I'm very grateful for that. So thank you for putting me on your gigs when you can. And I thank everybody else who calls me, who can utilize my service, because I'm just a servant to you all.
Oh man, what a sweet way to end the show.
Come on, man.
Have a
Right.
great...
You're really one of my favorite cats, man.
Likewise, my brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All
So let's
right.
music and the pandemic is lifting now. So man, let's do some gigs.
We're gonna for sure, man. Okay.
All right.
All right, folks. Well, that's the wrap for another Planet Mullins podcast, and this one featuring Jimmy Saxman Roberts. Over and out, everybody, and